The most important requirement for working with PHP is access to a PHP-enabled server. That's because PHP is a server-side scripting language. PHP is open source software, meaning in part that it's free. It's generally easy to install with no adverse effects to your computer, and considering PHP's popularity, your web host most likely has this option available to you on their server. You're going to need to contact them to see what technologies they support, but more than likely, they will support working with PHP. Unlike HTML, which can be tested directly in a browser, PHP scripts need to be run from a PHP-enabled server in order to see the results. Specifically, PHP is run through a web server application, such as Apache. You can obtain a PHP-enabled server in one of two ways. You can acquire web hosting, or you can install the software on your own computer. If you want to develop locally, which is what I'm going to be doing in this course, you're going to need to set up a local host. I'm going to be using MAMP, but there's a couple other options available as well. If you're going to be using a separate web server host, then all you need is the FTP application information so that you can upload your PHP scripts. But if you're going to be installing PHP on your own personal computer, then you can test the PHP scripts by saving them and moving them to the document root for the specific application that you're going to be using. Normally, that's going to be on a Windows machine in the C directory in the application folder and either in an htdocs or a www folder, depending on the program that you're using. If you're going to be developing on a Mac, then it's going to be in your applications folder in the application itself directory and then in an htdocs folder. Once you've got the PHP script in the right place and the server application that's running PHP is up and running, then you can use your browser to execute the PHP. You're also going to need an HTML editor or an IDE. I'm going to be using Adobe Brackets, which is free. It's a great little editor and it will enable you to write your PHP code. And later on in the course, we're going to be working with databases, so you're going to need to have access to MySQL. Once again, if you're using a web host, you should have these things available to you. But if you're going to be developing locally, I would recommend that you use a server application program that's going to install Apache and MySQL for you so that you can get up and running quickly. So to get up and running locally, you're going to need to use a web server application that's going to allow you to run PHP. Your options are going to be MAMP, XAMPP, or WAMP. All three of these are all-in-one installers. What I mean by an all-in-one installer is they're going to install PHP, Apache, and MySQL. In addition, they'll also install PHPMyAdmin, which is the web-based interface to MySQL server, OpenSSL, which allows you to have secure connections, a mail server, so you can send email, and some useful extensions. I believe that all of the new versions of WAMP, XAMPP, and MAMP are actually going to install MariaDB instead of MySQL. MariaDB is an open source fork of MySQL, but functionally it's equivalent. If you do get this up and running, you shouldn't have any problems with the examples that we're going to be using in this course. If you have previously installed any of these solutions, you can go ahead and use that. As I mentioned though, I'm going to be using MAMP. So if you want to follow along exactly with me, go ahead and get MAMP. MAMP is available for Mac and Windows. XAMPP is available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. And WAMP is available for all three as well. Download and install the application of your choice. And once you've installed it, you're going to go ahead and you're going to open up the application. I have my application set up to automatically turn on the Apache server and the MySQL server as soon as I launch MAMP. You can see that these are both green right now, indicating that my servers are running. And when I do that, it's going to open up a web page in my browser letting me know that MAMP has been installed successfully. Now I'm ready to begin developing. It also is important to note that when you use one of the web server applications, you're going to need to make sure that you're saving your files in the correct location. So because I'm using MAMP, I'm now in my application folder. Here's my MAMP folder, and here are all the folders that come pre-installed with MAMP. I'm going to be wanting to make sure that I create a directory in my htdocs folder, and this is where I'm going to be saving all of the PHP files that I'm going to be using. I recommend that you simply make a folder called PHP inside of your htdocs, and that's where you'll be saving your files that you're going to be using for this particular course. Now, if you try to open your PHP files in a browser, the file is going to display like this. It's going to show you the code that's part of this file. Right now, I'm not running the file through the web application server, so it's just going to show me the code. It doesn't know how to parse this. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to type in the URL address so that it's going to display the correct file. Now for me, because I'm using MAMP, I'm going to be using localhost :8888, and then I'm going to go into my O1 directory, which is the directory in which I have this example file. And if I click on the PHP file now, it's going to render in the browser in the way that I would expect it to. So it's actually rendering the code along with the PHP that's part of this file. We'll talk a little bit more about setting up your PHP and how to get PHP running in a future lecture, but for right now, I want to make sure that you have all the tools that you're going to need. If you choose to use XAMPP or WAMP, they are going to work in a similar fashion. You'll have to check the instructions for those applications so that you make sure that you're putting your files in the correct directory, but more than likely it's going to be an htdocs or a www folder. It is worth noting that if you are using Windows and you're using XP, you may have a firewall installed. The firewall may require that you change the ports that Apache and MySQL use. In MAMP, if I want to change the ports, I would go into the MAMP preferences, and if I go under ports, here's where I can change the ports. Currently, I'm using the default ports that MAMP recommends, but if I have problems with my system because my system is using those ports for something else, it is possible that you may need to change these. And again, you can check your operating system and find out if that's something that you're going to need to update or change. I'll just continue to use the defaults for my particular file. So a couple tips are whenever you restart your computer, you're going to need to restart your web application server, and you are going to need to make sure that you save your files in the web root directory. Once you do that, you should be able to get up and running with PHP without any problems. You're also going to need an IDE. Again, I'm using Adobe Brackets. You can get a free copy of that from brackets.io. And that's pretty much all you're going to need to get up and running with PHP.